Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Nedling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Nedling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will take your business or your life to the next level. Today, I'm excited to have Diana Fryc as my co-host, as my guest.
Sure, why not?
She is my co-host. That's right, the two of us. So let me just tell you a little bit about her wonderful background. So Diana is a marketing industry executive with 20 years advising brands from Fortune 50 to startups on how to address the toughest growth challenges. As partner and CGO of creative branding firm Retail Voodoo, she uses her expertise in brand development, innovation, consumer marketing, and package systems to help clients generate meaningful and sustainable growth. Easy for me to say. Diane believes that business should be a force of good and uses her networking superpowers to drive change in the food, beverage, and wellness industries, specifically in the areas of employment diversity, food equality, environmental justice, and the promotion of sustainable supply chain. Tireless and determined, Diana is obsessed with the world of food, beverage, and wellness brands, and has been building long-standing client relationships because people trust her to put the right combination of people and resources together. She also founded and hosts the Gooder podcast, where she interviews the powerhouse women leading on every level in the food, beverage, and wellness arena. Today, I chose the title for this podcast to be Women in Leadership, Making a Real Difference in a Company's Bottom Line. Please welcome Diana Fryc.
Well, hello. How
Such
are
a
you?
great background. I have a past of being with fast food, as well as now one of my other side hustles is wellness. And so I was really impressed with your background and was anxious to get you on the podcast. So
Thank you. So generous.
so happy to have you on. We always start out with an easy question, Diana, and that is,
No pressure.
where do you call home?
Seattle. I'm from the Northwest. We're on the opposite ends of the country.
We certainly are, but I have been to Seattle and I love Seattle. So beautiful. And I love whale watching too. So
Yes, Seattle is pretty gorgeous. We don't like to tell people this much, but it doesn't rain actually as much as people think. It's just overcast a lot of the year. And so the reason why we have green summers, and I mean green all the way through the summer, is because when it rains in the wintertime, all of that water stays here so that when the summer months roll around, we just have these clear blue skies like today. And a lot of greenery, and it's pretty magical.
Yeah.
But the secret, that's the secret. The truth is that it rains all the time. It just rains and rains and rains.
All the time.
All the time. Nobody likes it here.
It was funny. I had, for one of my assignments, I had in my previous job, a California, Oregon, and Washington. And so I spent 3 weeks of the month in one of those areas. And Washington, I just was and I drove, I flew to
Oh
an
my
airport
gosh.
and then I drove around,
Yeah, and
and
then you
I
drove.
was just in love with Washington.
Yeah.
Portland.
Seattle just became again, it wasn't like this for a little while, but it's the fastest growing city in the United States again. So during COVID, people left, and now COVID is over, and apparently it's growing like bananas again, which would make sense. The houses do not stay on the market very long around
Yeah,
here at all.
yeah. I flew into Seattle when I was actually going to a convention
Mm-hmm.
in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
And so I flew in there and then I drove from
Mm-hmm.
Seattle to Vancouver, which was a lovely drive too.
Vancouver, BC or Vancouver, Washington?
Vancouver, BC.
Okay.
Yeah, across the border.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's get into this.
Okay.
Why is creating visibility for women, particularly women of color, in the food and beverage industry so important today?
Yeah. So right now, and I'm going to just talk about CPG, consumer packaged goods, for those of you that aren't familiar with that acronym.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the acronym. Right now, the industry is still predominantly the leadership is still predominantly male, which is not a bad thing per se. The challenge that we have is when we're looking at fast moving consumer packaged goods like the food that we bring into our households, the cleaning products, the personal care products, we're still seeing 80 to 90% of those purchases being driven by women.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're talking about maybe not so much the selling of the products, but when we're talking about creating the products and meeting the needs of the households, it's really important to have women involved in the decision-making roles. That doesn't mean that right now there's plenty of women that are doing the footwork, that are doing the heavy lifting down below, but in leadership, we're still not seeing the kind of penetration that we need. Compounding that is that our sisters, though in women of color, are even less represented.
Right,
And
right.
when we look at the demographics of the United States, if we're just looking at the math, and I'm not talking about equity, but if we're just looking at the math, the diversity of the United States is quickly accelerating. And if we take a look at all of the quote unquote racial groups, however you want to look at it, there are actually more people that fit on the people of color side. There are more people of color as an entire group than there is of Caucasian people.
That's right.
And if we are not meeting their needs, then we're just really not doing a good job of taking care of the people of the United States, the consumer of the United States. So what we're looking for is, if you're looking at I'm going to talk strictly the math part. We're strictly looking at the math part. If we're not meeting their needs, then we're not going to get brand loyalty, and these folks will start flipping around, and we're not going to be addressing their needs. On the equity side, those of us brands that care, and I personally think we should all care, but those of us brands that care about meeting the needs of the consumer and making sure that we're talking to them in ways that are relevant and useful should also be considering that representation is necessary in order for us to even understand what the needs are. So that's how I look at it. Is you can look at it from a math part, the finance part. You're going to make more money if you're taking care of people's basic needs. You're not going to meet their needs unless they're on the decision-making board, not just part of your census that you're interviewing. And then also, if you're one of those people that feels like business should be a force for good, simply having the representation is paramount. It just really is.
For sure. So how can the naturals industry do better of educating, understanding the needs of the future generation Z and C buyers? So you're going to probably have to unpack that, because some people might not understand naturals industry.
Sure.
And also remind some of us the time span for Z and C.
Well, and they're a little bit sloppy too. So we're just going to be, everything will have an ish on it.
I'm okay with issues.
Yeah. So the naturals, if the natural industry went through a little bit of a change in the most recent years. So the natural industry, for those of us that are listening that maybe don't understand the distinction between the naturals industry and what we in the industry call the conventional industry, conventional side. We're still talking about food and beverage wellness brands, okay? The conventional side are those brands that we grew up with, the Cheerios, the Kellogg's, the Breyer's ice cream, products that were developed over years after World War II. So World War II, just to give you a very high level Reader's Digest, the World War II machine after the war got converted into the CPG industry because we had all of this manufacturing capability and no jobs once the war was over. So we started to manufacture foods that had really long shelf lives and products that had really long shelf lives. So we moved from industry or a world of buying fresh foods and making foods from home into kind of these TV dinners, packaged goods that had 1 to 2 year shelf lives, et cetera, et cetera. That's the conventional industry. The naturals industry, which started around the 1970s, was developed by a group of people, mostly the boomers, that started to go, we're putting preservatives in our foods, we're putting dyes in our foods. Is this really great for our body? Is this really great for our environment? And slowly that industry grew. Many of us still remember going into our local Kroger's and seeing the organic section that was like a 5x5 booth and everything looked weird and funky and soft and squishy. It's evolved over the years. So has food science. In the last 10 years, food science has really exploded, where we've been able to get into the DNA of a pea and pull out isolates and proteins and that sort of thing, and start to make foods that are plant-based, and started to get the attention of the tech industries. This happened right around the 2014, 2015. That's when we first started to see what we call meat analogs. So Impossible Burgers, products that are plant-based but designed to look like something else or taste like something else, behave like something else. And so we saw a big group of people who'd been creating video games and technology and everything look at food and go, oh, this is cool. I get it. There's a technology component. I understand that. Also, becoming a foodie got really sexy, and Hollywood started to get into it. And that also was really fantastic for investors. And what happened in the food industry, in the naturals food industry at that moment, was a shift from kind of this homegrown, holistic earth kind of loving people. We were starting to see some equities because women tend to be the largest demographic of people that start small businesses. And I can talk about that in a little bit. We saw a shift happen almost dynamically. This technology people came into the food world, started to hire leaders from the conventional side, which were predominantly male and white male, and bring them into this natural industry. And we started to see a shift where the naturals industry became purely about making money, purely about profits and promotion, and using those talking points about environmental justice and social justice as marketing elements, but not necessarily adhering to them all. So what can the naturals industry be doing better? I think kind of a little bit of a wake-up call and say the naturals industry has a space, but we're talking to ourselves. We're a lot of white people that have access to a lot of people, a lot of money or resources or contacts, making natural and better for you products that are designed for us because the representation is not there. So kind of going back to your first question, we are not taking a look at what the needs of the rest of our consumers are like. And it's because we don't have the representation. We don't have the representation from people of color standpoint, but we also don't have a representation of people of different kind of incomes. There's this assumption in the naturals industry, by the way of the products that we create and the price points, that people who don't have high income are not interested in living healthier. And that is a fallacy. But when you have investors putting money in a really sexy industry, they're going to want to create products that have really big margins, that have really high velocities, and not take a look at the larger audience. And I say, if we bring in the diversity into leadership and start taking into consideration that we have people who are of lower economic status or have real physical ailments where eating better is in their best interest. And if we look at the size of the prize, if we're going to look at the math again, the numbers again, there's actually so much more business that can be had by creating products that can address this full spectrum of the American consumer than they can make in this small upper middle class to higher class audience. So really just kind of stepping out of our headspace and saying, okay, do we really need to make, I'm making up numbers. Do we really need to make 40% margin on everything? Can we be okay making 20% margin and feed that many more people or educate that many more people or take care of that many more people? Because the end product is less people sick, which means lower strain on our medical system and people living longer lives, happier lives. Like, I just don't see what, I don't understand what the net negative is, but that's just me.
Oh, that's awesome. So what's the most surprising hurdles that women, as you see it, in business are facing today?
A couple are, the biggest one is, I'm going to say, ourselves.
Yes.
Women tend to over self-criticize and tell ourselves that we're not qualified to do a lot of things that I think men do a better job of saying, I think I can do that, and so therefore I'm qualified, versus women who feel like, well, I haven't done it 103.7 million times, so therefore I'm not qualified.
Yeah.
Somehow we need to find that middle ground, and rely on and kind of get ourselves, push that self-talk to the back and start to believe in what we're capable of and not just what we've proven. So I think that's our biggest hurdle.
Yeah, I agree.
The second hurdle is we do not have a business environment that supports women who are still the primary caretakers at home. And this gets into another much bigger conversation, but the long and short of it is, home, there's far more equity on the home front. We're definitely seeing men step up and take on more responsibilities at home. We're starting to see a resurgence of multi-generational households, which I think is going to be critical for a lot of the younger generations to kind of come who want to have families from a financial and an accessibility standpoint. So I think we need a readjustment or a realignment on what work-life balance looks like. Maybe take a look at shorter work weeks, allowing people to split jobs up. So instead of work share was something that was tried in the 90s for a little while. I think it might be something that we might want to reconsider again. Expanded education, expanded childcare, less expensive childcare. It's a really big systemic change. Small moves would be, as an employer, offering flexibility when it comes to work from home for those where it makes sense. In manufacturing, it doesn't always work that way. And for other of those that we've seen, a number of larger companies like the Starbucks of the world to offer on-site childcare to help with some of those people, and maybe even start to delineate who has access to that childcare. So if you are an executive, you don't have access to on-site childcare, we want to make on-site childcare more accessible for those that have limited means and limited access, and start building some of those equity things. We're not talking about equality, we're talking about equity. How do we help our employees feel good about coming to work and give us our best work and not have to worry, is helping bridge some of those gaps that our society doesn't have in place it's set up right now.
That's excellent. So why aren't there more women in the food and beverage leadership roles, the C-suite, the VPs? Is it really some of this thing that we just talked about, the self-sabotage or doubt in their skills to compete? And how can we change this?
Yeah, another big systemic question. There is a lot of self-sabotage. is also something for consideration. I mentioned that I would address this.
Mhm.
I would address this earlier. One of the things that I learned, I interviewed Kira Dilly from Frito-Lay on my podcast, and she gave me a statistic that said the number of women that start small businesses, particularly in the food and beverage industry, the percentage of women that are single mothers is exponential to women who are in family units of some sort, and outweighs the number of men that start small businesses.
Mhm.
And the reason why is these women are looking for opportunities to create a way of taking care of their families that it will help them actually participate in the family. So we're seeing a lot of single parents, specifically single mothers,
Mhm.
who need a lot of flexibility in their day, and then they grow their business to a certain size, and then they sell it to somebody who can scale it into something much bigger. I'm not sure what the answer is specifically, other than if somebody could study all of those small businesses and find out what are those activities or what are the consistencies, and can we build systems to be able to support those women. Because I will tell you, if anybody starts a business, it's exponentially harder to run and grow a small business than it is to plug into a 9 to 5 job.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
using air quotes, at a major corporation. I'm telling you, they work much harder. So you have dedicated people that are willing to work their butts off, but they need some flexibility. And I think until we can understand what those needs are at a granular level and start addressing them, we're not going to be able to see women grow into those roles. And there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of untapped talent out there that can't work in the workforce the way it's set up right now
Mhm.
structurally. So finding that flexibility will be the magic key, I think.
Yeah. And as for someone who had spent almost 40 years in the corporate side,
Yeah.
and now the last 6 years
Yeah.
on the entrepreneur side, I will say, yes, I'm working harder than I worked
Yeah.
in my 40-hour job,
Yeah.
but I'm more fulfilled. You have greater control.
Yeah.
And also, I'm always been big on self-development and professional development.
Yeah.
And a lot of times in a job, it's like, no, you have to do your job, specific duties
Yeah.
every day, set 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And there's no time for you to be personal development. And when I
Yeah.
started my career, there was time. They made
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah.
so I think it really, if you want to attract people to your 9 to 5s or job sharing or whatever it is, you
Yeah.
need to afford back the ability for that person to grow.
To grow.
And really, from a succession standpoint, it never
Yeah.
made sense to me
Yeah.
to not have formalized mentoring systems,
Yeah.
coaching systems, and training for your people that are the B players or the C players,
Yeah.
that are gonna that have the capability to
Yeah.
become an A player if
Yeah.
given that developmental piece.
Yeah. I will say that I'm seeing more of that happening now than beforehand. And that is, I think, this younger generation that's coming into the workforce, Generation Z, sort of demanding it. There was some rumblings around millennials. Millennials are kind of late 20s to early 40s. Um, and we always have to remember, every generation goes through their 20s, and every generation in their 20s has some sort of rebellion that's
Yeah.
different than the
Yeah.
generation before them. That's just part of being the 20s. So I want to be really careful that what I'm saying here doesn't sound like, well, that Generation Z. No, millennials are the same way. I'm part of X. When I was an X, we had our own rebellion, and the boomers, and it's just the nature of people.
Absolutely.
But I think between the millennials and Gen Z having the COVID show up in the middle of that, and seeing a complete destruction of support systems, and finding out where the gaps are in everything from mental health to job stability to equality. I think there was a lot exposed at that time, and every generation ends up having access to more and more information and more visibility. People who are Gen Z, these teenagers and early 20-year-olds, they are way the heck smarter than I was at that age.
I
They
agree.
just infinitely smarter coming in, far more astute. And part of it is, I want to say, because, I was such a good parent, but the other thing is just access to data.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I know my 4-year-old grandson and my 7-year-old grandson are far smarter than their parents were.
Yeah.
And
It's
I'm not even going there
miraculous.
as a boomer.
Right. So I would say that, if we can, it's really all about being open to change and open to what's possible. I know as I'm Gen X, and as I start to, continue on my age journey, I have to be careful to, every time I hear myself using language like what my parents use, like, well, in my day, and I have to go, okay, in your day, when somebody was 50, they were off, they were close to retirement.
Old.
And, now 50 is legit midpoint, because they're saying we're going to live into our early hundreds now. Oh, I've got another 50-ish years of working here. I cannot be set in stone. So much changes in 3 or 4 years now, to say this is the way it has to be for the next 50 years is ridiculous. So I think it's an openness to understanding that things have changed before us. They will change right behind us, and to figure out, what's your personal North Star, and making sure that you fit, that what your decisions are as a leader are guiding those people behind us, so that they can support us, but then also that they can have a fulfilling life. Because why do you want to work your whole life and have it be a slog? Come on now.
For
Right?
sure. For sure.
Yeah.
I was talking to someone the other day on a podcast about change management. In my last several years as a project manager, that was one of the things that I focused on, because change was happening so often, and with our technology, and especially the upcoming with all of the artificial intelligence piece, you have to get used to the fact that you're going to be constantly pivoting. And I think it's so important that we look at how can we add that to the curriculum that we're teaching our kids. So they don't struggle with it.
Well, that's another systemic change. We have, mean the education system. Nobody wants there to be change in the education system. It seems like everybody wants what was taught in 1982 to be the same now. And well, I just find that to be foolish. But I also think that education should be lifelong. I myself I just finished my MBA,
Congratulations.
2-year program. I have a book for you about change. It's called, what is it called? I don't even remember, because my brain is still fried. Saturday was my last class.
I'll
have to send it to you. But, talking about change, and that change is, whether we want to believe it or not, nothing has ever remained the same, period. End of story. Because if it was, we'd still be slicing hay and living in huts, and we're not.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and you can't grow. You can't, every time you get to that comfort level, that expertise level, then you need to learn something new, and then you start all over, and you're not the expert anymore, and you're going to fail, and how your mindset stays with that, okay, let me look at this as exciting and interesting. And I guess having that masculine mindset that I can do this, what the heck, it's not rocket science. and
unless
and then,
it is.
unless it is.
And then that's different.
Then you can get the schooling. But I think there has to be changes. And for me, going to elementary school in the 60s and 70s, high school, we said the same thing. And that's why I never really gave the millennials a bad rap, because all the things that they were saying, I remember saying when I was their age. And it's like, it's just a different way to say it, but it's the same thing. Just remember back when.
Exactly.
All right. So we are closing on where we need to just do a quick couple rapid fire things.
Okay.
So how can we be a advocate to help diversity in the corporate leadership. And even I think beyond that, if you have a small business, anything, how can you be that advocate for diversity?
Well, diversity means a lot of things to different people. I would say being an advocate means you're open to input, you're open to criticism, you're open to learning, and even be open to asking for help. I think it's okay to reach out and say, this is what I have found over and over when I was been doing my podcast, where before a podcast, I'd ask some questions and I'd say, I'm really nervous about asking this question on air. I don't want to sound like blank, blank, and blank, but I think it's really important for the audience to hear this. And time again, I've heard, ask the question, because people, if that is genuinely how you're asking the question and you're representing a group of people, they probably have that same question too.
Yeah.
And they're afraid. So there's a respect component, be respectful, come hat in hand with a desire to learn and to understand, be willing to not know and be wrong. And then also, if you are somebody that wants to use that phrase advocate, because there's some people who may not want to own advocate, but do want to be an advocate. And then there are those people that want to be an advocate, like yourself, where you're saying, I want to share this, then just identify yourself as that person when you are talking with people and saying, I want to be an advocate. How can I be of best use to your culture or your group of people? And I think advocacy for people of color, women in color are huge. Other areas of opportunity are advocates for people with disabilities, formerly incarcerated, and former military. There are a lot of stigmas around all of those groups of people. And I think there's a lot of room for advocacy in all of those areas. Pick one. You don't have to do everything, or you can be agnostic, but just know that diversity is pretty widespread.
For sure. All right. And the last one is, who has been your greatest mentor?
Mentor
on this journey that you're taking?
I'm going to say that actually my business partner and husband, David Lemley, has been my biggest mentor, because some of the you can do this, get over yourself, has come from him.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then he'll say, if I was in your shoes, I would say it this way, or I would do it this way. So getting that, like, this is how a male or a man would show up in this meeting, and this is what you can say, legitimately can say too. So he is my advocate. He's also a women's advocate as well. So he's been my greatest mentor, and by way of saying, here's how I walk, now follow in my footsteps.
Awesome. I love that. That's great. All right, it's time for me to share the screen that you can get the contact information for Diana. So if you all are listening in, I will give the information for the website. But if you're watching, you can get a screenshot. So be prepared. And if you haven't got a paper and pencil, go and run and get that right now. I warn everybody every time, but with this. All right, so those listening in, website is https://retail-voodoo.com. Retail-voodoo.com. And by the way, I love that name.
Thank you.
Facebook, Retail Voodoo, all one word.
Yes.
LinkedIn, Retail-Voodoo. And Instagram, Retail Voodoo, all one word.
Yes.
And I'm going to let Diana tell you a little bit about what you can find when you visit the websites.
Yeah. So Retail Voodoo, we are a brand development firm providing strategic brand and design services for companies in the food, wellness, beverage industries. And our clients include Starbucks, Kind, REI, PepsiCo, High Key, Sahali Snacks, many other brands that you might know. that are market leaders or fast growers. And brands typically come to us when they're looking to make big swings. So we're talking about market domination, disrupting the marketplace through branding, marketing, package design, and related services. That's what our team is all about. And if that is something that you're in need of, or you just want to learn more about, give us a call. Give me a call. Our general email address is info@retail-voodoo.com. And I hope to hear from some of you.
Awesome. And as we show there, you can go to retail-voodoo.com/contact if you want to contact them.
Yeah.
It's been so great talking to you. You're such a source of great information. And I worked for a fast food industry for a number of years. And I'm also originally from Pittsburgh, and Pepsi is the other Coke.
Yes. Well, what I will say is PepsiCo is one of the companies that I know is making significant investments in their environmental footprint.
Awesome.
They're doing a lot of R&D to take care of garbage and waste and reuse of plastics, and also trying to create products to reduce food waste by upcycling. They're doing a lot of work, a lot of work.
That's awesome. I love hearing that. All right. So as always, please go to the website as mentioned and check out. And if you need more information, don't hesitate to contact. She gave you email address. Once again, I always remind you that life is a journey, and it is up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Nettling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Nettling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.